Hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar on the Rite of Election. I know several of your parishes are celebrating also the call to continuing conversion, and so this webinar will cover both of those, but we are focusing mainly on the Rite of Election, and in a few minutes you'll see why. First, let's clear up some confusion. The difference between catechumen and candidate is vastly important. The catechumen is the one who is not baptized and who is catechized or might not be catechized. So it doesn't matter if they're catechized or not. If they are not baptized, they're automatically a catechumen. They're the ones that will go through the full process and will be fully initiated at Easter or whenever it's appropriate. For them, it is recommended that they spend a full liturgical year in the catechumenate, and that's part of our national statutes that are found in the Rite book at the back, and that's a whole other webinar that we'll be doing a little bit later on in the year. However, just to know that the catechumens are the ones that need the full process, and it doesn't matter if they're catechized or not. Candidates, on the other hand, are those who are baptized in a Christian faith, and they may or may not be catechized. Some of them may, some of them may not. So that's something to always ask them at your initial interview. If they are baptized in the Roman Catholic Church and never had any catechesis at all, so they were baptized and never went back to church, never took classes of any kind, then they might be considered part of the RCIA. That's in number 400 in the Rite book. However, normally Catholics are not part of the RCIA. The time frame for these people, for the candidates, is when it's most suited to their needs. And so that means that some of them may need a full year, some of them may need a little less, some of them may only need a couple of months in the catechumenate. It's really going to depend on where they are. So a good example would be someone who's been married to a Catholic for 30 years and has been going to Mass every Sunday, and their children went through Catholic school, and so they attended those, First Communion meetings and catechesis and done different things with their kids around the Catholic faith. They would be considered a catechized person, and they are already catechized in the Catholic faith. Therefore, they may not need a full 8 months, 9 months, or even 6 months in the catechumenate. They might do well with just a few months. So be careful with those reasons to move them to the next level, those the qualifications for entering into election or doing the rite of acceptance. Pay attention to those, and again, a whole other webinar, but pay attention to those so that they're only in a time that's not more than necessary. And these are the ones that will do a profession of faith before they complete their initiation. Adults who are baptized Roman Catholic and have knowledge of the Catholic faith really don't belong in RCIA. And I think for a lot of us, we put them in RCIA because it's the only program we have for adult catechesis, but we really need to look at that in our different situations and figure out how to work that. So an adult who is baptized Catholic and who is catechized may only need some ongoing formation, or may be able to do something like your 6 to 8 week adult confirmation course or something along those lines. It's really going to depend on their situation. So again, that's something we need to talk about when we'll do a whole other seminar on how to sort people into the right processes. Why is it important to know this and to do this, especially right before we celebrate the rites? Well, first of all, because we need to honor the fact that everyone is unique in God's house. None of us have the same story. None of us have the same background. And so we need to really pay attention to who these people are and be pastoral for them and not just kind of say, oh, you're not baptized, you go there, and that's it. There's always got to be a conversation. Also, we need to remember that those who are already baptized have a status as baptized Christians, and we need to honor that as well. That doesn't mean we treat them better or worse. It just means that they're in a different place, and we need to really recognize that and work with them on that. And finally, we need to remember that catechize doesn't mean taking classes. Somebody, as I said before, who'd been going to Mass with their spouse for 30 years is considered a catechized person. They may never have been in a class before, but they've been living the life of a Catholic by going to Mass every Sunday, hearing the scriptures, hearing the word, and celebrating around the table even if they can't receive the Eucharist. And so they would be considered a catechized person. The purpose of this rite the rite of election is to close the catechumenate proper. That means that the catechumenate is the time of teaching the faith. So now that we're closing the catechumenate, no more teaching. We begin instead an intense preparation of sacraments, and that can look like a whole 5-week retreat. I mean, really, that's what it should be, is time of spiritual preparation. No more teaching the doctrine. That should have been done during the catechumenate, which is why we need a longer catechumenate, really, but just a side note. But really, this is the time now to put teaching aside and really work on spiritual preparation. I am working on a new video that is going to give you some ideas of how to do that, and that should be out in the next week or so. This is also the moment where they change from catechumen to elect. And elect is a very important term that we need to honor and make sure that they are aware is an honor. They're being admitted into election as the chosen ones to receive the sacraments, to be fully initiated as a Catholic, to join this family that they've been preparing to join for quite a while. And so that moment is very special. And I'll show you when we go through the actual rite, that actual moment where the presider says, I declare you to be a member of the elect. And that is a big moment. So keep that in mind. And once this rite is over, actually once that moment is over in the rite, you cannot call them catechumens anymore. They are now the elect. And then just finally to know that it is the bishop's place to admit them into election unless he delegates them, which is what he's done this year, is delegate all pastors for. So the rite of election and the call to continuing conversion are very similar but different in main ways. First of all, the rite of election is for the unbaptized only, and the call to continuing conversion is for the baptized, and the baptized usually the uncatechized. Now, this is important because you may have a situation where you have 7 elect and only 1 candidate. Are you going to do a whole other rite for the call to continuing conversion for that 1 candidate? Yes, because the prayers involved and the intention are very different. You may look at it and think, well, they're the same thing. Just a word here. No, it's a completely different intention in the rite. So please make sure that you know that. Also, the rite of election is really mandatory. It's part of the process. In the book, it doesn't say you can do this, you should do this, you might do this. It just says you will celebrate the rite of election. Therefore, it really is mandatory. It really is something they need to be a part of. The call to continuing conversion, however, is optional because the rite actually says you may celebrate this rite. So you don't have to if you only have 3 candidates and none of them are able to really come to Mass because of the pandemic or whatever. It's okay if you don't celebrate that call to continuing conversion. The catechumens, however, with the rite of election is different, and we need to look at ways that we can include them even if they're not able to come out in the pandemic, and we'll talk about that a little later. The rite of election takes place the first Sunday of Lent or during the first week of Lent. The call to continuing conversion can take place anytime during the beginning of Lent, so anytime in the first couple of weeks is fine. The rite of election is to be done by a bishop or his delegate, whereas the call to continuing conversion can be done by the pastor or the deacon of the parish. So there's some pretty stark difference between the two. Let's look at some logistics for the rite this year. With the pandemic, we're all in a whole different place. So ideally, the rite of election is celebrated within a Mass after the homily on the first Sunday of Lent. That's when it's set out. However, that's just the ideal, and that doesn't always work. And in our diocese, we've never had it like that. It's usually been outside of Mass and then on a Sunday afternoon, then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in the evening. So we've never done it in a Mass. Now, you might want to celebrate it in a Mass on Sunday because your community is small and you've only got a couple of catechumens. So you may decide, hey, we're going to do it on the first Sunday of Lent here in front of the whole community. That's perfectly fine. But if not, then you can really celebrate any day of the week within that first within that first week of Lent. So you could do it. I would personally do it either the Saturday before the first Sunday of Lent or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday of that first week of Lent. Oh, of course, Wednesday's a little busy with Ash Wednesday, but any of those other days. So you can do it during the week. Readings, if you're doing it on Sunday at Mass, must be the Sunday readings. If you're doing it on Sunday afternoon, outside of Mass, must be the Sunday readings of the first Sunday of Lent. If you're doing it any other time, then you can use the readings of the day if they're appropriate. You can use the readings from the first Sunday of Lent or actually from any Sunday of Lent. Or in the lectionary, in the newer lectionary, you'll find a section called Ritual Mass, Election of Names, and you can use any readings that are in there. But really, the first Sunday of Lent is very appropriate, those readings for any time that you're doing the rite. A few more logistics, of course, unless things change, which I doubt, it will be an outdoor celebration, so be prepared for that. Make sure you have the space set up and you watch the weather and et cetera, et cetera. Because we need to do it shorter, we don't want to elongate the masses that we do have. Unless you have just a few catechumens, I would suggest you do this outside of Mass, meaning that it's just a word service within the rite of election. A really good suggestion that I heard in another webinar that I attended was because the catechumens and candidates will be seated in a location where it's easy for them. Normally they sit with their godparent, like in the front row or something like that. Well, in this case, of course, if the godparents are not from the same household, then they really should not be sitting with the catechumen or the candidate. They should be 6 feet away, either right behind them, 6 feet behind them, or 6 feet to either side of them. So that the catechumen and the candidate don't feel alone, you could ask them to invite a household member to be a stand-in for them physically and sit with them so that they're not alone. And at various places of the rite, you might also invite the household member to put the hand on the shoulder of the candidate or catechumen like we normally would at any of the rites. But the godparent really needs to keep their distance if they're not from the same household. Because you're doing this at a different time, you might be doing it in an evening or in a late afternoon or whatever, and not everybody can be present. If it's possible, a good suggestion would be to live stream it so that other family members and other members of your assembly can participate virtually and be a part of it. Consider eliminating anything that is optional. And what I did was in the script that I prepared and that I can send you if you would like a sample copy, is that anything that was in parentheses or in brackets in the rite, then I just eliminated those. And that way we're not being bogged down or making it longer than it really needs to be. So normally at the rite of sending, you gave them a cross or some other symbol, or you did some kind of extra ritual, which is perfectly fine in a normal year. This year for the rite of election, we're not going to do that. Eliminate those kinds of things or do it at another time. The combined rite, even though the rite book itself says that it's not the preference, this year, if you need to do that, of course, you're very welcome to do that because of our situation. But also, if you have a lot of catechumens and a lot of candidates, do consider separating it and doing those rites at 2 different times. The reason is 2. Number 1, because of attendance. If you're limited with how many people can attend and everyone is distanced, then you may not have enough space for everybody, or the space will be pretty full and people won't be able to see anyway. So it's just easier to separate. And the second one is for time, because we really don't want to have longer periods of time where people are exposed to others in a crowd. So having everybody at one makes the time longer. Normally that's not a problem, but in this case of the pandemic, it is. So it's really going to be a pastoral preference of what works for your parish. Let's look at the rite itself, and we're going to go really in depth into each part of the rite just very quickly. First of all, music. Let me address music really quick because that question keeps coming up. If you want to have music at the rite, that's fine, but you have 3 options. Option number 1 is you just have instrumental music, somebody playing guitar or piano, and at different points, and that's just kind of filler music to kind of give it some ambiance. Number 2, you can have an instrumentalist and a cantor, and the cantor can sing. However, the cantor really shouldn't be encouraging the assembly to sing or trying to get everybody to sing along, because that's not what we're doing right now for safety reasons. So the cantor can sing at pivotal points, but try not to make it a performance. It really should just be as people are coming in, as people are walking out, as people are signing the book, those types of movement filling times. That would be when you would use music. Don't use any sung acclamations. Or 3, you can use some recorded music. I prefer recorded instrumental music really, but you can use a CD that you own. If you have an OCP subscription and you own the OCP CD, that's from Oregon Catholic Press, then I believe you do have permission to use that in a live stream. Otherwise, you need to be careful with copyright if you're going to use music on a live stream. So make sure you have your license if you're going to do that. So let's look at the rite itself. After the opening, the song, or if you have a song, and the opening prayer, we jump into the liturgy of the word, which we already talked about. Use only the appropriate readings. Also, you really only need 1 reading, a psalm, and a gospel, just like a weekday mass. You don't have to do both readings if you don't want to. That kind of makes it a little easier, have less lectors. The homily should be brief and address the catechumens, but should also address the assembly, whether they're there or they're live streamed. And it really should encourage everyone to be a good example of Christian life to the catechumens. So don't forget to address the assembly in that homily. After the homily, we have the presentation of the candidates, and this is where the deacon or the minister in charge of RCIA or one of the catechists comes forward and basically presents them to the assembly and to, namely, to the pastor who's going to be admitting him into election. So there's a couple things you can do. Now, there's 2 places where you can call each person by name, and you can do it both times, or you can choose one or the other. And this is the first one. So when you're presenting them, you could call them by name and have them stand up in their place, and then the assembly can all see who they are. You can also just say, those who are to be admitted to the act of election, please stand, and then they can just all stand. or again, you can call them by name. It's really nice if there's assembly present, especially that they can see who they are. Family members that are present, even if it's just 2 family members that are there, they are the assembly. And so it's really nice to kind of include them in this visual where they stand up as they're presented to the pastor. As soon as they're presented, then the godparents are to stand and they're going to do an affirmation. Again, you want to have a family member be next to them and they can put their right hand on the shoulder of the catechumen and candidate. But when the priest asks, who the godparents, do they this, do they that, and the godparents are answering, we are, it's the godparents who answer, not the person accompanying. So the person accompanying from the family, from the household, they are just kind of a physical stand-in for the godparent. The godparent themselves do need to be present in order to answer the questions. In the Rite book, there's 2 formulas. There's A or B. I personally like B, so that's what I use. But you can use either one. So you can go back to your Rite book and decide what you want to do. And then if the assembly is present, of course, we need to remember to address them and ask for their approval as well as their affirmation. So make sure you include that piece. Once that's done, then they're going to be invited forward and into enrollment. And again, there's a couple of things you can do. This is the second time that you can call them by name. If they have not already signed the book, then you can call them by name. They can come up and sign the book in that moment. Again, with their family member with them with their hand on the shoulder, and the godparent can be walking up at 6 feet to their left or right so that they can all approach together. You may not want to do that. You may want, if you have a lot of them, especially if you have a lot of catechumens, you may want them to sign the book ahead of time. Well, then they can stand and call their own name, or you can call their name as the book is being processed up by somebody up to the front so that the assembly can see the book. Or if you don't want to call names, the book can simply be processed forward with the person bringing it up, getting to the front, and then saying, I present to you the names of our candidates for election, and then show it to the people. So there's a lot of ways you can do this. Be creative, and it depends on what works for your space and how many numbers you have. Make sure, though, the Book of Elect is a vastly important symbol of this rite. So you need to make sure that the Book of the Elect is visible and present and is processed up in some way so that the assembly can see that these names are being brought forward for enrollment. During the act of election is when the presider will then accept the book, and he can do that physically by taking it and holding it up, or he can just have the person stand next to him holding the book 6 feet away, of course, holding the book up high, and he can, just kind of gesture towards it as a way of accepting those names. And this is the moment where he says, I declare you to be elect. And again, a very important moment. So make sure that you let your pastor know that he says that very clearly and he declares it. He's not just saying, I now declare you elect, but that he's really speaking it out and proclaiming it. I now declare you to be elect, and that's in the script. It's in the rite itself, so it's very plainly put there. We're asked then to show a gesture of reception or of excitement or whatever, and we do this by our applause. Normally, we would let the godparents, we would have them, give their catechumen a hug or something, or their elect now a hug or whatever. But at this point, maybe instruct them to do a profound bow towards one another or some types of sign or something to each other to kind of acknowledge that they now have this new relationship. At that moment, where you finish that rite of election, then you're going to go back. If you're going to do a combined rite, you're going to go back and do pretty much the same thing with the candidates. So that's going to be the call to continuing conversion, and it's the same. You start with presenting them to the assembly, then you do the affirmation of the godparents, and then you'll have, instead of the act of enrollment and admission and election, you have a rite of recognition, where the presider then says, I recognize that you've come forward to receive your sacraments, and you will be the ones to receive sacraments at Easter. Whether you do just election, just call to continuing conversion, or the combined rite, we end the same way. We end with intercessions, and you have many intercessions in the Rite book that you can choose from, or you can write your own. You can include local intentions. You can use the ones you use on Sunday and just add 2 more for the elect or the candidates, whatever you want to do. My suggestion would be not to have more than 3 or 4. By this point, people have been listening and paying attention and been involved, but you're going to lose people if you have too many intentions. So either just do the one-liners like they have in the Rite book, or just do 3 or 4 if you're going to do regular petitions. So just keep that in mind for people. Then you do a prayer of elect, or if there's candidates available, you can, if they're present, you can also do prayer over elect and candidates. There's a couple of versions in the book. There's a version for candidates, a version for elect. There's a version in the combined rite. So it's all over the place in the Rite book. And then you always end with a dismissal. And in this case, you're going to use, if you're doing it outside of Mass, you're going to use a dismissal like you do at the end of Mass with the greeting, the Lord be with you, and then giving a blessing. If you're doing this within Mass, then you just dismiss the elect and candidates if they're also being dismissed, and then the godparents can stay for Mass. But you do it just like you would do a regular Sunday dismissal. And then you can play some instrumental music as people are leaving. A few other little tips or ideas really quick. Find a way for godparents to give testimony of their catechumen before the rite if you can. A couple of ideas that I've heard that people are doing. You can have the godparents record a 1-minute video on their catechumen or candidate. They can do it on their phones from home and just record themselves and send it in to you saying, my name is Rosie and my catechumen this year, I am godparent to Savannah. Savannah's been really curious about religion since she was 12, which is when I met her, and she's really grown with a lot of questions, and I'm excited to accompany her on this journey. Just something very simple. And then you can put these up on the website. You can show them, at different points whenever you have a Zoom meeting or whatever. You put it on social media, however you want to get it out there to people. So the assembly begins to learn who the elect are. You can also list their names and a 1-sentence description in the bulletin or your parish newsletter that gets sent out. Their name, Savannah Garcia, went to Catholic school for 2 years and was curious, but then couldn't continue, and now she's excited as an adult to continue her journey as a Catholic and, whatever. So just a sentence or two about each one, just so, again, the assembly gets to know them. If you are signing the book outside of the Rite of Election, if you're doing it before the 15 minutes before the event, or, the week before, or whatever you're doing, make it special somehow. Don't just say, hey, you, come here, sign the book, Make sure that they understand what it is, that it's something very special. It's a very special symbol, and that they can take some pride in actually signing their name. The question came up in one of the webinars that I did live. What about children? Do we write their name for them since they sign so messy or whatever? No, the whole symbol is that they're signing their name. And when you sign your name, that means something. You sign your name on a check. I know nowadays it's not as prevalent and as symbolic as it used to be, but signing your name used to be a very important symbol of who you are. It's your assent. It's that you are a part of whatever you're signing. And so make it special. Make sure, even if they're kids, that they sign the book themselves. For us, I ask you a couple of things. Number one, if you're able to take some pictures, please send me some pictures just so we can see what it is that your parish is doing and celebrate with you. If you only have a small group of adults, or you can put them into small groups and take a picture with them properly distanced and wearing masks, go ahead and send me pictures of your candidates or catechumens, and I'll love to put them together in a little slideshow for Bishop so he can see all the people that he normally would have seen at the Rite of Election. I also ask you to send me, whether you do pictures or not, send me the names of your electing candidates, and I'm going to put them into a little nice booklet and present them to Bishop that first week of Lent, so that he can keep them in prayer all through the season of Lent as well. I've asked for everybody to turn in an RCIA information form. That's one form for parish. So please make sure that whoever's in charge of RCIA at your parish gets that done and in. If you're able to get that to me by February 2nd, then we'll be sending out some special prayer cards for your elect as a gift from us that you can kind of put on their chairs before they come in, wearing gloves, of course, and then they'll be able to have a prayer card to take home with them. And then, and after Easter, you'll be getting an additional form that will ask you for names and addresses so that we can resurrect the practice that we used to have of bishops sending a welcome letter to them after Easter. So you'll be getting more information on that as the time comes. Couple just a quickies. RCIA information form is on the website. If you go to our website, which is www.dioceseoffresno.org, and you go to the worship and initiation page, there'll be a subpage of RCIA, and everything that you'll need is on there, and I'm constantly trying to get that updated. So the RCIA information form is there. That's where I just need the numbers: how many catechumens, how many candidates, how many are children, etc., etc. So make sure you get that in ASAP. Also, we are still having, and it's still open for registration, a Rite of Election morning of reflection. This will just be like a 9 to 11:30 little reflection time for your candidates, for your catechumens and their godparents, and then also for your team, if your team is able to attend. And it's all based on the theme of the Rite of Election, which is being called to baptism. If your candidates want to attend, I'm not going to send them away. I'm not going to say they can't come. They're welcome to come, just as long as you know that the focus is going to be being called to baptism. And so I'll need to know if there are candidates so I can kind of adjust what I'm saying so that they understand what's being said, that they are already baptized, so it's a little different for them. So just let me know. This will be in English and Spanish. We'll be separated. We'll come together and then we'll separate by language so that people can listen in the language that they like. So I hope that's been good information for you. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to call our office or to email me at rhernandez@dioceseofresno.org. Thank you.